A long journey and waiting over the drunkard for 2 days for him to realize that the first landlord was actually tricking him to ridicule him by sending him to someone who will simply scoff at his plans. But he does not mind it and is busy to find someone else who might lend him the money. This book is described as the best ever novel by any writer in any language by some critics. One never came across any other one which undertook a more comprehensive project while holding the attention of a reader as well. Having been written such a long time ago, the book details everything. At times, the furniture of a room during an important scene is dealt with a long description which is very distracting. At times, the author, speaking as a first person, warns that if he went into the full details of a person or a setting or a place, it might entail writing an entire book independently. So he is sparing those details and the reader as well, possibly. In modern times, an author has no such authority over a reader to patronize him in such a manner. However, lasting nearly 1,000 pages, the book is full of characters being introduced as a subplot often, who frequently make long discourses, mostly trying to make clear their position on religion or politics or other issues before, before they do something which might actually give impetus to the story. At times, a character may speak for 5 pages without the paragraph being broken. When the book reaches the denouement, the murder around which the story is built almost loses its importance, and the character starts arguing at length with his alter self, trying to make several things clear with himself. He possibly has a psychiatric issue or too much time for intrigue. However, in the earlier part of the story, he is too clever to be a madman and seeks interest with great focus. But he is not alone in that. Most of the characters have many layers of thinking which they reveal one by one as the book progresses, just like the layers of a Russian doll emerging one after another. Yet another remarkable character is a fatherless 13-year-old boy Kolya, who reads widely from the books left behind by his father and tries to surprise his established authors, tries to surprise his tries to surprise the established intellectuals of the town and his friends with his knowledge. He at times pretends to know what he actually does not. In doing so, but he never fails to deal with an adult on equal terms and has his peers as his underling. In his younger days, once he slept on a railway track on the prompting of his friends and lets a train pass over him. It was to prove that he was a disparate character, and it made him famous in the town. So most of the important characters are well literate in the story, including the servant of the father Karamazov, who actually is suspected by all of being an illicit son of him. Father Karamazov is later murdered, and his two sons and his servant are the main suspect. Even the woman looking for a financially profitable relationship with a high official or a landlord discuss a column published in a journal or newspaper published in St. Petersburg, which speculate about the people and the society of their town. At times, a character casually passes a serious literary judgment like, if Lev Tolstoy cannot actually write, it was not for the lockdown. If it was not for the lockdown or the isolation COVID-19 imposed, one might never had the chance to go back to a book long back abandoned after reading a few pages. The complicated names, slow pace, and the formidable size of the book are not an appetizer really. All very well, but one feels that it could have been avoided and the book shortened to keep focus on the main story of the novel. It is the last book of the author which he wrote while he was in a fragile stage, so possibly he wanted to say everything he had to, or having been co-opted into the system at this stage, he wants to make every character politically correct mostly to save his position in the system. But he has less control over them, and they surprise a reader often. Because a trained engineer, Dostoevsky, after launching his literary career, suffered greatly in the earlier parts of his life. By a journal who was an uncle of the writer Vladimir Nabokov, the literary group he was a member of, which did the crime of reading a banned literature, was sent to a notorious Siberian prison where they were to be executed by a firing squad. While a few have been possibly killed, he was the third in the line to be fired at. A missive from the Tsar himself arrives, and the remaining members, including Dostoevsky, were saved from being executed and were subjected to live for many years in subhuman conditions in the jail. It was all before he wrote any literature seriously, so it had an impact on most of his writing. The book has characters who are often corrupt to the core. A landlord and his sons have affair with a common woman. The women knew it all, but why with each other to win a common lover? His sons and the servants at his home want to eliminate him. All the characters mostly know each other and create intrigues against one another. It defines their whole life, as they seldom are involved in some other business or intellectual pursuits. If it was not a murder mystery, about which even the author is not much bothered towards the end, then too the book is readable for the way it explains the social situation in the country. The court scene in the end does not conclude the story by saying clearly who committed the murder, though it lasts more than 150 pages. One of the brothers, Karamazov, who is convicted by the court, who is very sick after the verdict has been given, always maintains that he is not guilty. The other brother of him, who claims in the court to have committed the murder, is so sick with brain fever that the court and the people think if he is having hallucination due to his condition. The third suspect, the servant and a suspected illicit son of Father Karamazov, who is very sick during the trial and commits suicide at the end of the verdict day, on the eve of the verdict day, does so without saying clearly if he was guilty or not in his suicidal note. Another character dies, who is a sickly child who always is tormented by the insulting way people treat his father for being a drunkard and a underclass and a former low-ranking soldier. Possibly the author himself was very sick at this stage and dies a few months after this book was published. He writes so many things in such a great detail, but finally himself loses focus from the story. He often makes the dubious kind of characters in this book look like the people who are cynical and rebellious, but the upper class people too are very conservative. The Father Karamazov is an erstwhile underclass who becomes rich due to his chance marriage to a wealthy woman, and once she dies, he indulges in all kinds of excesses. The system is so corrupt that the convicted Karamazov is already planning an escape to America while on his journey to the jail somewhere in Siberia by bribing the guards. It is a relief to have finally completed the book after dropping it so many times.